Greetings, citizens. This is Minion Soldier, and this is the Piracy Show. Now, an interesting date just passed yesterday, and that was the 31st of August. Now, for those of you who are not sure of what the significance of the 31st of August was supposed to be, it was going to be the launch date of New World, Amazon's new MMO, but that has, of course, been extended just a little while as they work on a few bugs. But don't worry, this is not really going to be a video talking about a new world, but something somewhat related to it and something that is very pertinent to Star Citizen. In the original alpha of A New World, it was very much the original vision of what the game was going to be, which was kind of like an open world, full loot, hardcore PvP MMO. And it changed. And like the reasons behind that change are very realistic. I mean, the business reasons are, they're very self-evident. While there is certainly a very vocal group out there who love that sort of game, it's not a very big group, and the casual player base generally tends to win out in the end. Is that something that is going to happen to Star Citizen? Do you think that Star Citizen is going to, kind of change its tune on a lot of the world PvP that happens in the game? I think that it's too soon to really know if that is going to happen. Like some people, for them, it's easy. It's a fair comparison, one for one. Yeah, they'll probably get rid of it. Oh, I'm almost sure that one day they're, instead of a slider bar or whatever they decide to implement, it's just going to be an on or off switch. I am not so certain that that is the case. And I think that Star Citizen is a very unique situation, and it deserves a little bit of an explanation as to what makes Star Citizen unique and different compared to something like A New World or World of Warcraft or anything like that. You see, in the traditional MMOs, and we've talked about these recently, we've talked about this is the last generation of the old style of MMOs. This is what is very quickly going to start to become extinct. These types of games, A New World, Ashes of Creation, and any, smaller efforts that try to eke out a living in the MMO genre in the market. These are really these are the last of the old generation. Whereas Star Citizen represents, I would argue, the beginning of a new generation. Though, I mean, you could kind of say that for EVE Online as well. When you're dealing with these older games, there's a lot of tricks that developers use, certain ways to place a hill, certain ways to place a mountain or a canyon at the edge of the map to make the world feel a lot bigger than it actually is. And in fact, these worlds are actually shockingly very small. One of the reasons why A New World doesn't really have mounts in it, at least in my opinion. This would be like Minions conspiracy.
At some point, Rick,
theory.
I want to experiment.
One of the real reasons why A New World doesn't have mounts in it,
how easily I can fucking keep you guys healed with that shit, right?
That it would become even more obvious.
If you don't have to go like a full tank and you just can kind of stay like a heavy DPS,
at this point in history, in this
that'll
era,
fucking work pretty
a
goddamn
horse
good
would
too.
make complete sense, but it's not there. And I think the reason why it's not there, there's a lot of BS reasons that people give, but the truth of it is because the world is so small. Now, as a consequence of the world being so small, it's a lot easier to bring players into conflict with one another. You go around, you're trying to hunt resources or whatnot. If you squeeze all the players into a much smaller area, they're going to be fighting over those resources a lot more. So if you're trying to drive that PvP, a smaller area kind of works for you. And also, another reason why you can't mount is because it would make it a lot easier to just rush in and gank somebody. But
campsite.
When you're dealing with such small areas, and in a lot of these games,
I haven't used that thing in
really
I don't know,
kind of
20 fucking
the
levels.
way that the world PvP expresses itself. In some people's idealization, PvP combat in these games is all kinds of 1v1s with intricate battles and all that. But in truth, it generally ends up being 4 or 5 people. They get together and they're just like, yeah, let's go hunt the solo players, and boom. And that's pretty much what happens in any open world kind of PvP MMO. It's the truth. It's very rarely ever that honorable, 1v1 combat. And I mean, I can look back at, when I was trying to when I did earn the Conqueror of Azeroth title during BFA, when I had to get 1,000 honor in all the zones, 1,000 honor. It was, a lot of that work was done solo, and I would go out there and I would fight people mostly on my own. But the problem is in war mode, if I could get someone stuck down, chances are, if anybody else from my faction was flying by, they would immediately jump in on the kill. I had gone out with groups before, but it was a little too disorganized. I really wasn't into it, and I kind of wanted to be, not so much ranging around, but kind of focusing on getting certain areas done. So I'd kind of do most of it on my own. I was a rogue, so I could get away with it. But more often than not, I would just see these large armadas of players, going out and hunting hunting the solo players. And I would just watch these ganks happening over and over again, because, when you're invisible and you're seeing another horde guy getting swamped by like 20 or 30 people, you're not like, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to jump in and turn the tide. It's like, nah, it's like, sorry, bro. Your ass is about to get cashed in, and I ain't going to help you. It's like, I'm just going to go the other way. And that's kind of the reality of open world PvP in a lot of these games, is the worlds are small, so players are more constricted and more likely to come into contact with each other. And world PvP in general, it ends up being gank squads, versus solo players. And that ends up becoming the most of it. Now, Star Citizen is kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum, because Star Citizen isn't based off of these small and very limited worlds. Star Citizen is at the other extreme of the spectrum. Star Citizen's smallest moon will probably encompass all the land area in a new world, in World of Warcraft, and in just about every other, land-based MMO that has ever existed, and still have room to spare. And that's one of the things that you kind of have to confront, is that when you're traveling to an objective in an old style MMO, it's like, oh, you got to ride your pony for like 5 minutes to get across the field or around the mountain. Whereas in Star Citizen, that same distance that you traveled in an MMO represents maybe like nothing compared to just coming out of Quantum and then traveling to an objective, whether it's a bunker or whatnot. There's so much more area and so many more places for people to hide, that I think that one of the more interesting things that we're going to see in Star Citizen is, depending on how many players a server can handle, or a separate instance, or whatever you want to call it, can handle at one time, how far spread out are players going to be from one another? That is going to be a very interesting question. That is going to affect how world PvP plays out. I mean, depending on how many players there are in an area and how you define that area, however that ends up getting worked out in practice and not just in theory. World PvP might be something that's always enabled, but most people never even see it. And that is a realistic possibility when you're dealing with areas that are just so massive. It's totally possible, right? And in truth, I think that Star Citizen, or CIG in particular, is going to go, if they're going to soften world PvP, or they're going to try to kind of de-emphasize it, or try to get away from the negative perception of it, I think that what they'll realistically do is they'll probably go and they'll look at the penalties for death or the penalties for loss, and they'll try to alleviate those through the insurance system. Ideally, do we want a game that where world PvP is impossible? And I would say that, there are some players who are like, yes, by all means. But I think that if you make it interesting, if you make it fun and you make it thrilling, but at the same time you lessen the negative impact of it on a player, you can actually get it to a point where most players would be like, oh God, here comes a gank squad. And, they'd be like, oh, this is going to get exciting. Everybody get into the turrets. let's go. Let's fight these guys. And, if we lose, we lose. But don't worry. We'll just go back. We'll get the insurance. We'll get our cargo back. We'll get our components back. It's cool. Let's relish this moment. Let's have this fun. Let's have this excitement. That's really kind of where you want it to go. But is it going to go there? Is that the way that it's going to play out? It's still too early to tell. There's a lot of people who just sit there and nod their head and say, "Oh yeah, no, World PvP, they're totally going to remove that. They're going to make an on-off switch. You know that they are." It's too soon to tell. It's too early to know. And I think that what CIG is going to do is they're going to use the experiences of games like A New World, and they're going to say, you know what, Amazon, maybe their wallet, their head was more into their wallet, but I think that there's a better way to kind of go about it. And that's one of the benefits of having somebody else kind of go first and make the mistake first, is you can kind of correct for any errors that they made, when they tried to do it. And I think that is ideally where it's going to end up. I think that CIG is hopefully going to look at World PvP and they're going to say, hey, you know what? Let's try to get it to a point where a player kind of feels like, let's say you're the average hauler pilot and you're flying your Caterpillar from point A to point B, and you're making your money, whereas you may not go out looking for it. If it happens, it's going to be interesting and it's going to be fun, and you're not going to walk away going, oh my God, hours of work out the window. I hate this game. I quit. That's probably where they're going to try to, ameliorate it or make it easier on players to kind of take these situations when they arrive. And I think if they play their cards right, they can do it. I think that they really can do it. Now, of course, there's the opposite side of, the argument. And there are a lot of people who feel like, no, it should be full loot, and it should be ruthless, and it should be brutal, and it should be cold-blooded, and it should be just the most awful experience when you get blasted by other players. It's like, I want to feast on their tears. I want to hear the lamentations of their women, and crush your enemies and all that. The Conan quote, which escapes me right at the moment. Oh, what is it? To crush your enemies and hear the lamentation of their women. But the truth of it is I think that in your mind, you've idealized that to be what you want. But the truth of it is that has a very negative impact on games. And that's kind of why Amazon made the decisions that they made, is that tends to drive a lot of people away from games. And the people who really kind of go for that, I think, they kind of like that sort of thing, but it's ultimately it's self-destructive. That kind of fun cannibalizes your fun because it drives the people away that you're trying to hunt. And so at the end of the day, it's not just like, that crybaby lost. It's like you end up losing in the long run too, because your game becomes less popular, makes less money, and therefore less money is put into development, for that game. And your game is also more likely to be, when a company is looking at their offerings and they're looking at their franchises and they see this game that's languishing and never really getting anywhere, they're probably much more likely to say, you know what? Maybe it's time to spend this money on a different project. Maybe it's time to kind of go and look in a different direction and see what's popular and what makes more money. Because at the end of the day, companies want to make money, right? Also, Star Citizen is a game that tends to have a few bugs in it, as we can see, and I don't think that being too harsh with the penalties when you're dealing with a game that is probably going to be in a less than perfect state for quite some time to come is overly smart either, And it's kind of one of those things that I kind of feel that I'm okay with the world PvP, and I'm okay with it getting, even a little bit crazier. But at the same time, you have to be realistic and look at, the impact per player, because players are going to look at, the money that they've spent in this game versus other games, and they're going to start to say, you know what, I get more fun out of playing this game than I do out of Star Citizen. Maybe I'm just going to sit it out and wait for Star Citizen to get better. So maybe what I'm saying is, you want hardcore PvP, or you think you do, but you don't.
Thank you for watching. So if you want to keep up with the latest and greatest in Star Citizen and Squadron 42's development, please follow us on our social media channels. See you soon.